The following is a presentation of the St. Louis Chess Club.
Welcome everybody to round 4 of the 2022 Spring Chess Classic. I'm Grandmaster Alejandro Ramirez here with my good friend, Grandmaster Christian Chirila, to bring you all of the action of the day.
Alejandro, always a pleasure to commentate these exciting games with you here from the beautiful studio in St. Louis.
It's always good to be here with a good friend to look at some good chess. Might not be the Singfield Cup, it might not be the US champs, but it's an important stepping stone for many of these players. It's a way for many of the 2,600 plus Grandmasters to find experience, to find rating points, to find tournaments where they can catapult themselves to the very elite and break that 2,700 barrier.
Well, Alejandro, let's take a look at the standings after round number 3. We have Ray Robson in Group A leading as well, tied for first place with Aram Hakobian. These players are just simply playing marvelous chess up to this point, 2.5 out of 3. Jeffrey Chong in the third position, sole third position with 2 points, and then a big tie for fourth position. We have Sam Sevian, Ilia Nyzhnyk, Darius Zvierch, and Hans Niemann.
Alexandre was able to save half a point yesterday against Ilia Nyzhnyk, but still that only puts him at 1 point. He is in clear 8th. And slightly luckless, Misha Antipov and Kamil Dragun both lost with the white pieces yesterday to Darius Zvierch in a very long fight, and Kamil Dragun losing to Ray Robson also after an intense fight, and they find themselves with only half a point. Meanwhile, in Group B,
we have an authoritarian leader, and that is Chris Repka with 3 out of 3 points. Christopher Yoo, sole second position with 2 points, and then we have a big tie for third position with 1.5 points. We have Robert Hungaski, Elshan Moradiabadi, JJ Ali-Marandi, your student Alejandro, Titas Stremavicius, Sam Khanin, and Abhimanyu Mishra.
Slightly luckless have been Arman Mikaelyan, who's had some good positions, was able to draw against Christopher Yoo yesterday, but we thought he had a very promising position there with the white pieces. And Harshit Raja, strong grandmaster, but has been unable to find his first half a point here in St. Louis so far. Surely he's going to try to bounce back in the tournament. As we see the tournament hall currently in action, very fighting chess up there, and everybody's very tense. Remember, they have already been playing for 2.5 hours, so certainly the tension is rising. The format for you, it's 2 tournaments. They're both round robins of 10 players each. The time control is a classic time control, 90 minutes for 40 moves, with an extra 30 seconds started given for move 1, and once you reach that move 40, you get an extra 30 minutes.
Also, the players are not allowed to mutually agree to a draw in less than 40 moves. They can find a repetition, they can find a perpetual to make that elusive draw, but they cannot mutually agree to it. This is going to ensure that we have a very combative event.
Let's take a look at the schedule. It's very simple. 1 round a day, and every day we start at 1 p.m. Commentary starts 2.5 hours later at 3:30 Central Standard Time. And remember that because of the possibility of playoffs, first place will be determined on over-the-board playoff. We will be starting the last round on Thursday, slightly earlier, 2 hours earlier. Our commentary will start at 1:30 instead of 3:30, but of course we will be bringing you all of that action.
Also, make sure you join the conversation on social media. We are very active, specifically on Twitter. You can find us and send us your questions at #SpringChessClassic. Also, our show is broadcast on YouTube as well as on Twitch. On Twitch, if you donate more than $75, well, that's going to allow us to support an up-and-coming player, from the scholastic player all the way up.
Any amount helps, and remember, all of those bits, donations, subs, they go directly to a kid. You will be helping their chess programming. You will be helping their career as chess players. Don't worry, they are not going directly to us. They're going to a good cause. So please subscribe to the channel and help us out there. Let's take a look at the pairings for the day. Obviously, we're going to start with the A group, where we have some key matchups. Sam Sevian against Darius Zvierch is already a classic of the US Championship tournaments. They'll be facing here for the Spring Chess Classic, and they'll certainly be facing each other in the US Championship, settled to be happening in October here in St. Louis. Aram Hakobian against Misha Antipov is a battle of collegiate chess. Aram Hakobian currently representing Webster and Mikhail Antipov representing the University of Missouri. Hans Niemann is playing against Alex Landerman. Ilia Nyzhnyk is playing against Kamil Dragun. But our matchup of the day, without any doubt, is this one. Ray Robson against Jeffrey Shong. Both of them relatively young players, over 20 but way below 30. And they have already made names for themselves here at the St. Louis Chess Club, playing many events against each other. Jeffrey is currently one of the top players in the world, not just in the country, but still trying to find his stable form over 2700. He's had a little bit of trouble finding his stability up there, and he's currently playing against Ray, who's simply playing magnificent chess. Meanwhile, in Group B, we have a clear leader there, but let's see who is trying to fight to catch him. It's Christopher Yoo that's playing with the white pieces against JJ Ali-Marandi. Harshid Raja trying to find his first half point of the tournament against Titus Stromavicius. Meanwhile, Sam Khanin is going to be playing against the youngest grandmaster in the world, Abhimanyu Mishra. Mikaelyan is playing against Elshan Moradiabadi. And yet again, we have a clear matchup of the day. Robert Hungaski, one of the most experienced players in the tournament, participating in events around the world, currently sitting at 50% after losing that first game with the white piece against Christopher Yoo, bouncing back on day number 2, but is currently playing somebody that has been scintillating over the board. He's been clean, he's been precise, he's been methodical, and he's currently sitting on a very well-deserved 3 out of 3. Can he make it 4 out of 4? Cristian, your boy Chris Repka has been shining.
Absolutely, Alejandro. Well, let's take a look at this game. As you were mentioning, Alejandro, Robert Hungaski is a very experienced player. He's been playing quite a lot recently, and he's definitely trending upwards. He has been winning tournament after tournament, and he gained a lot of rating points as well in the past year. Right now, he's facing Chris Repka, the battle of two GMs. Chris Repka, 3 out of 3, extremely strong performance up to this point. He has had not a single problem in any of the games. Let's see how this game played out. E4, E6. Well, this might have come as a surprise for Robert Hungaski because generally Chris Repka plays either C5 or E5. In this case, he decides for the French defense, D4, D5. Now we see E5, C5. This advanced French with E5, which is becoming more and more popular. Generally, for the past few years, knight to C3 or knight to D2 has been considered to be the main line. E5 was not considered to be giving white too much of a pull, but in recent times, white has found this very clever idea of just simply giving up a pawn, sacrificing a pawn in the center. Well, should black take it? Probably not, because if you take on c3 after knight takes c3, this bishop will be landing with a tempo on e3. For example, you can go knight to e7, bishop to e3. You would love to be able to play this move d4. That would be a fork, instantaneous fork. Well, it's not a good move because I can simply take this pawn on d4. You can take back, I can take back. And now, unfortunately, this bishop on d4 is taboo because if you take it, I'm just simply going to have this thematic bishop to b5, attacking the king, attacking the queen as well. Discovery check. That's going to lose for black instantaneously. So of course you don't want to play this move. D takes c3. You don't want to give you don't want to give me too much speed in my attack. So instead of that, he played the move bishop to d7, rook to e1, knight to e7, h4. Once again, still leaving that pawn on a d4, and now we see rook to c8, h5, knight to f5, bishop to f5, e takes f5. Now the structure has changed. Of course, black has a weakness on d5, but that's going to be easily protected by a bishop coming to e6. It doesn't look like a great bishop, but it's a very good defensive piece for black. Knight to c3, bishop to e6, rook to e3. Of course, white is trying to arrange his pieces towards black's king on the king side after a short castle. Knight to f5, bishop to g5, f4. I like this move, bishop to g5, provoking the move f4, which closes up the action of the bishop on c1, which was a very, very important attacking piece because with the pawn on f2, some bishop takes h6 sacrifice would have been coming on the board in most of instances. b3, castle, bishop to b2, rook to c7, rook to c1, rook to c8. And to be honest, right now it feels like black is taking over. White's attack is not going anywhere on the king side. and black has his pieces aimed towards the pawn structure on the queen side. Now we have knight to c6, and we get this position. This g4 move is a very committal decision for white. And to be honest, Alejandro, I do not like it. We were discussing this game a bit before we started the broadcast, and you were mentioning this move, knight to g3, which probably would have been a much better option for white, just simply targeting this pawn on f5. If you have to play the move g6, well, that gives me a hook on this pawn on g6, and I can just simply keep this pawn on h5 for the moment, and I can take on a g6 and open the position on my terms whenever I want to do that. So I think this knight to g3 would have been a much better solution for white. Well, he played the move g4, and this just simply gives up a pawn, and it doesn't seem like your attack is going anywhere as white, because whenever you're going to push this pawn on f5, it looks threatening, but it also gives up a lot of squares, specifically a lot of squares for this bishop on e7, the dark square bishop to come to g5, enter the fray, get closer to the white king, and that will spell trouble for white. So now we have this position. A couple of moves later, this is the current position on the board, and it seems like black is just simply dominating. The pair of bishops, extra pawn, and the invasion coming on the c-file. This is really looking poorly for white.
I feel there was just a bit overzealous there by Robert Hungaski. It's strange, he's a very experienced player, but sometimes time's ticking, you don't find a clear plan. He felt that pressure on the clock looming. It wasn't quite there, but it was certainly looming. You start feeling very uncomfortable when you're under 20 minutes and you see that time control is still far on the horizon. You still have another 20-some moves to make, and you don't really know what to do. And I think g4 was a little desperate, a little panicky, I would even go back as far as to say, and that currently he is just in a losing position. The pair of bishops to me are too powerful. The control of the c-file, the only open file, is tremendous. And as you mentioned, Cristian, I think white's king might actually even be weaker than black's.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Despite the fact that it seems those pawns are marching towards the black king, well, they're not going anywhere. Because as soon as you play that move f5, your king becomes so much weaker. And it seems like only black can take advantage of that.
Absolutely. All right, let me take a look at another important game. I spotted a very nice little detail here in the game between Khanin and Abhimanyu Mishra. And it shows you just how hard chess is, in my opinion. This is a very interesting position. We call these type of positions the hanging pawn types of positions. And the way that we analyze a lot of positions in chess is based on the structure, the pawn structure in this position. And you can see that white has these pawns on the 4th rank, particularly the ones in the center, these two, c4 and d4. They're considered hanging pawns. They're called like that because they can defend each other but cannot be defended by any one of their pawns next to each other, adjacent to them. And they give particularly interesting strategical battles. They take up a lot of space. They're able to provide white with a lot of space. And notice that it restricts black. You cannot really access any of these squares as the black side because of these hanging pawns creating tension. On the other hand, the hanging pawns themselves constantly require attention. You can see that in this position, even a move like bishop takes f3 might be considered, because if you play knight takes f3, suddenly nobody's defending c4. That's why the bishop went all the way to a2, where it's a little bit awkward. So it gives pluses and it gives cons. One of the biggest pluses of the pawns, as I said, controls the 4th rank. Here, after the move a5, white said, you know, the move a5 prevents a5 from myself. It doesn't allow me to use this hook to pressure the b6 pawn. But you've already moved your pawn from a7 to a5. Why don't I just put my rook on c1 to b1, pressure this pawn, and say, well, thank you for the free pressure. I'm still not really sure how I'm going to make progress. But on the other hand, your pieces, they're a little bit on the passive side as long as these pawns are alive and well protected. And boom came in a strategical idea, said Abhimanyu, you know what? Check this out. Knight d5 is actually a surprisingly difficult move to meet for white. And it's certainly an easy one to miss. Why? Because your pawns have been guarding these squares for so long, you don't expect any of black's pieces to jump into them. Knight d5 is tactically justified by the fact that if you take on d5 and I take with the bishop, you're currently attacking the queen. The queen really does have to move. And then you discover this attack of the queen of the rook on c3, and if black wins a very important pawn and probably the game. And the main point of the move knight d5 is that I'm currently threatening to take a bishop on c3 with my knight. You don't want to allow me to do this. But if the bishop retreats to a1, then in this kind of scenarios, the bishop is much more passively placed, and the knight can jump to b4, block out this file if I felt like it, also take on a2, that is defending the pawn on c4. And suddenly, because this knight is hopping around, instead of being passive on f6, where it's locking up its own bishop, I think it's black for clear choice. After the move knight d5, I think I've seen Sam play the move bishop a1 actually, and I expect the move knight b4 with, quite honestly, a very strong advantage for black. Out of nowhere almost, it seemed like black and white had about equal opportunities before the move rook b1. Pretty much anything else.
Rook b1, Alejandro, not only that it allows this move knight to d5, but it also locks that bishop on a2.
Yeah,
you can no longer put it to b1. So now knight d5, knight b4 just comes with tempo, and you cannot save that bishop on a2. That's a big problem.
It's a series of unfortunate events here for white, right? None of this is possible without the move knight d5, but it must have been a complete mind slip, a complete blunder. He didn't see the move knight d5 coming. It's not like it captures anything. Sometimes your mind is not really thinking along those lines. But strategically, it's very important to keep black's pieces at bay. They have to be kept behind the third rank for white to have the compensation here. The more pieces we exchange, the weaker the hanging pawns become. And of course, losing the pair of bishops is no fun. Abhimanyu spotting this very nice knight d5, very aesthetic move here in this position. And I think that gives him a strong advantage. He's going to be a clear favorite for the rest of the game.
Absolutely, Alejandro. I want to point your attention to this game between Christopher Yoo in sole second position with 2 out of 3 points and Ali-Marandi Chemil Chan, your student at SLU. Ali-Marandi has been having a topsy-turvy event. He started off with a loss, then he bounced back. Then yesterday was complete madness on the board, and somehow it finished into a draw. But right now, once again, he's playing with the black pieces, and we're going into this position, this endgame. Rook and knight versus rook and knight. White has an extra pawn, but as a compensation, black definitely has the more active pieces, right? This rook on the second rank, cutting the king on g3. Also, the knight seems to be much more active. Now, at this point, I feel he made a huge mistake. Of course, the computer is saying knight to b3 would have been the right decision. What pieces in this type of endgames do you want to trade? That is the biggest question that you need to ask yourself when you're playing this type of positions, where would you like to go into a rook endgame 4 versus 3 on the same side? Sure, that's going to be an easy draw. Would you like to go into a knight's endgame 4 versus 3 on the same side? No, absolutely not, because knight endgames resemble very much pawn endgames, in which if you have an extra pawn in general, most of the times you're going to be winning. It's the same for knights. Even though it looks innocuous, white's advantage 4 versus 3, it doesn't seem like you're going to be able to create that passed pawn. I'm just going to be able to slowly squeeze you. And this is exactly what happened in the game. We will see that in just a second. Knight to b3 would have been the much better solution. Rook to b1 and now rook to d3, attacking the pawn on e3. If you go knight to c4, now I have a couple of options. But rook to c3 probably would be the easiest way out. And of course, after h4, I'm just simply going to take, you're going to take, I'm going to take. And this is an easy draw. Maybe even black is slightly better. But of course, it's going to end up in a draw. Instead of that, he played the move rook to b2. And this is a huge, huge mistake. Because after knight to c4, rook to b4, knight to a5, rook takes a5. The rook takes a4, pardon me, rook takes a4, knight takes a4, and we have this 4 versus 3 with the knights on the board. Also, this very important move, f5, comes in the position, destabilizes black structure on the king side, also gets rid of my double pawn. Very, very important move, f5. And now we have this position on the board, e4, f6. And to be honest, right now, I'm really liking white's chances to potentially take the full point in this one. I'm going to go knight to e3, knight to d5. Then I'm going to slowly start squeezing you with the move f4, f5, h4, gain more and more space on this side. The material is still quite reduced, so black definitely still has chances to potentially save this position, but it's not going to be easy. Alejandro.
No, it's suffering for a while. I do feel objectively this is closer to a draw than to a win, just because there's not enough amount of material. But that being said, this is going to be quite the torture. There's a lot of ways to squeeze black from here. Making that draw is difficult, and it will take quite a while. Let's finish up the games in Group B just so that we see what's going on there. In the game of your student of Roger Harshit here playing against Titus Tramavicius, it's pretty one-sided. You can see that this rook on c5, it's just a better piece than the rook on d6. There's a pair of bishops. This bishop is threatening the pawn on d5. And similar to the game of JJ Ali-Marandi, it's just really a question of whether black can survive this. It's hard for me to say just by looking at it. It feels like the position is very locked, that it's difficult to make progress, but white has so much space, white has so many targets, white does have the pair of bishops. I feel that this will be at least torture for a very long time, so we're going to leave it alone. I'm being told that, just to finish up Group B, a lot of action did happen in the game between Arman Mikaelyan and Elshan Moradiabadi. I'm just going to start from here because I don't want to spend time on the entire game, but this is a mess. Both sides are somehow attacking, material is even. This bishop's pretty nice. This knight is pretty bad, but it is holding on to an important position.
It's a good
G7.
defensive piece.
It is a good defensive piece, right? You have two rooks there. You start to have to consider as black what happens if rook g7 and queen g4. The attack is nothing to be shrugged at, but still, perhaps no decisive threats. And precisely because of that, black decided to think, I'm going to invade on the queen side and start creating my own threats via the first rank. So we have a very double-edged position here. White going on the king side with a frontal assault, black going on the king side more with a side assault on the first rank. d5 was played, which is a fascinating move, trying to open up the position, trying to play e6, joining the fray with more moves. But some things happen. Queen c1 threatens checkmate on g1, so you have to do something about it. Rook e3 is very logical. The move queen g1 actually doesn't do very much. Yes, the king is not super happy about being on g1. On the other hand, kind of hard to reach it. And in the game instead, it seems like Elshan played the move h5. At the beginning, this looks like a very clever move in the sense that the rook doesn't have actually a lot of good squares. Now, let me explain that. For example, if the rook goes to f4 or something along those lines, then, of course, after pawn takes d5, you don't have the same kind of threat on the g7 squares. And in many cases, these rooks are actually pretty awkward. One of those cases is, for example, when you play e6 and I take on e6, you would have liked to immediately take on e6 here back, and then your pieces start coordinating. This is kind of the point of the d5 break. But in this particular position, if you take on e6, queen takes f4 is check, and that wins the game. So you start to notice that, surprisingly, most of the rook moves here have some kind of problem or another. For example, the rook on d4 means that this pawn is no longer creating any kind of threats, so it's immediately pinned. And rook g3 just gets mated in one. Unfortunately for Elshan, I could just ignore it. I can take on e6, I believe.
Precisely, yeah.
Yeah, again, queen g1 doesn't do that much. And if we trade rooks, the problem is that the remaining threats with e6 are actually quite strong. It's not easy to see this from far away.
No, it's visually appealing. Black's position is visually appealing, in my opinion, because you have those two checks, queen to g1 or queen to h1. Also, you have potentially ideas of g3, of course. After g3, you're not going to take back with the rook because that's going to lead to a checkmate on g1 or h1. You're going to take back with the king, and it seems like white's king is in danger. But it's actually the reverse. Black's king in this position is in huge danger. For example, if you take back on e6, whatever you take with, I'm not going to take with a bishop, giving up a check. I'm going to take with a rook because I want to preserve that important bishop attacking piece on c4. It's very important to keep as many attacking pieces as possible. Right now, of course, that knight cannot be taken for various reasons. Rook takes e8 is a huge threat, but also if you put the queen on c3, I can just drop back with the rook. That's going to be a discovery check and your queen is going to be lost. So it seems like after rook takes e6, I'm trying to understand, what did black calculate? What did Elshan see in this position that he felt, okay, I'm safe to do this. I'm safe to allow all of white's pieces to invade like this. Maybe exactly the line that you are showing right now, Alejandro. King to h7, and I think this is what he missed, this bishop to d3 move.
Maybe, although I think once you see rook e6, you feel you're kind of lost.
Or maybe he also felt that potentially queen to f4 might come after rook takes e6.
Maybe. Let's put that position again. So you take on e6, I take on g4, you take on d7. I kind of have to take back. There's nothing better. And then you take, and you hope for queen f4 check. But unfortunately...
And I think within his calculation, maybe he forgot that his bishop moves from c6 to d7.
That's a huge deal.
And now after g3, you no longer have rook to h1 checkmate.
Yeah, that's a big deal in the position. But it seems
and we have some moves.
We don't have the move d takes e6. We have the move rook d4.
Both players missed it.
Which seems to be not ideal. Queen g1, king g3 is the current position. And we might have a wild one in our hands, Cristian. I don't even know how to begin evaluating this. White, surprisingly, doesn't have any real threats, right? Because if you take on e6 or you take on c6, d4 is hanging. That being said...
All right, Alejandro, I'm going to test you.
All right.
Find a good move for black.
Oh my God. I'm not gonna get this one right, am I?
If he finds it, black is probably going to be winning this game.
Winning this game, yeah.
Absolutely.
I have the feeling it's g6.
Once you see it, it makes a lot of sense.
I like the move g6.
And what is your idea?
Knight g7 and knight f5.
Great idea.
Okay.
The better execution is to go g5.
Ah. Oh, okay. Once you see it, yeah.
Once you see it,
actually,
yes.
g5 is very promising, right? h4 is a big threat.
Yeah. h4 is a big threat, but also this idea of knight g7, knight to f5.
Knight f5 is very strong.
Potent idea, very potent maneuver by the knight, including your final piece into the attack. One of the most important pieces into your attack. And you were mentioning, you hated that knight.
Yeah,
It was a defensive piece. Now it's going to transition into a tremendous attacking piece.
Oh, this turns the tables around completely. And g5, of course, immediately threatens the move h4. So that actually does require some kind of... I mean, I'm assuming h4, king g4 is not that playable.
No, yeah, big moment.
This is a big moment, yeah. This is a big moment for that game. Elshan, I saw that the way Elshan went for something, and he feels that he's better. I mean, I've played and seen Elshan play so much chess throughout the years. You kind of know through his body language when he feels he has something. And he's just kind of double checking. I wonder.
Can I show you why g5 and not g6?
Yeah, go ahead, Cristian. Take it over.
So now, if you go, first of all, if you go g5, white no longer has this move d takes e6 because I'm not going to take this rook on d4, but rather I'm going to give you a check first. And after king to g4, this rook is going to fall with a check, leading to a completely winning position for black. White doesn't have this extra tempo to take on f7 and create havoc in black's position. So after g5, of course, after h4, the only move would be rook takes h4, but that's just a simple win. We're not going to look at that. So after g5, things are very shaky for white. It seems like there's absolutely no move to break through towards black's position, and the only way to get out of this is to try to exchange the queens with queen to f2, which leads to a much better position after just the simple e takes a d5. It seems like after you take with something on d5, all of your pieces are going to be tied up. You cannot take with the bishop. This is key because after rook to f1, well, that's just resign on the spot. And if you have to take with a different piece, then the bishop, then I can just simply continue taking and once again force you to take with the bishop followed by rook to f1. This position right now is dominating for black. Elshan, as you were mentioning, it seems like from his body language, knows it. We're going to have to wait and see if he manages to pull through and win this one.
Yeah, we'll come back to him. Certainly a promising position here for Elshan. Let's go to Group A. We haven't seen a lot of those games. Just a little quick update on where everybody is standing. Sam Savian against Dariush Fiert. It's a little bit of a dry position. You can see that Sam had just played the move knight b5. I think it forces black to capture this knight on b5. It is still a little bit too annoying. Queen takes f5 would follow. Knight g5 is a devastating threat. But after the move h6, I really don't see what's wrong with black's position. The knight can come back to d6, where it will be very nicely blockading the pawn on d5. I'm not really sure that black is better either. White does have a lot of space. I feel this is very close to equality between Sam and Dariush. Meanwhile, in the game of collegiate chess, Aram Hakobian against Misha Antipov, I have to prefer White's position here by quite a bit, especially if this knight ends up landing on c4, which I don't know how to avoid. After which, This pawn on a5 causes a much cleaner impression than this pawn on c5 that's already blockaded. This bishop on d2 is certainly better than the bishop on c7. It takes a tremendous amount of technical task to actually push this pawn on a5 forward. But if you were to pick a side, I don't think it's even close. White is certainly in the driver's seat in this position. Cristian, you agree?
No, absolutely. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. The computer is saying that the position is very close to equality, but from a practical perspective, this definitely doesn't feel like it, because as you were mentioning, this pawn is so strong.
Yeah.
It requires for black so many resources, right? This rook on a7, this rook on b5, always keeping an eye on that. Now, you don't want to hurry with knight takes c4, because this allows me to get into the game with some tactics after knight to b6.
That's a nice move.
If I manage to exchange the knight, then I'm very happy.
Yeah.
If I manage to exchange the knight, then I'm getting closer and closer to equality. Instead of that, you're not going to hurry taking on c4. You're actually going to look at the position and ask yourself, what is black's next move? And that is to go f5. Try to put some pressure in the center, potentially dislocate this knight from e3 via f4. So the best move in the position for white would be to go g4 and just play a slow game. I'm going to reinforce the defense of this pawn on a5 with rook to a1, also of the rook on a4, and that's not going to allow this idea of knight to b6 in the future. So I'm going to go rook to a1, knight takes c4, and it does seem, at least from a practical perspective, once again, that white's position is to be preferred, and it's very important to look also at the clock situation. Right now we have 15 moves to make for Antipov. He only has 10 minutes on the clock. That's not a lot of time. That's going to go down to your final minute just like that. And then you're going to have to find some saving grace because you don't know what white is going to do. Potentially rook to a1, g4, maybe even bring the king all the way to c3. I have a lot of preparatory moves as white. You don't have a clear way to just simply wait in this position, and this is a big problem.
Yes, a little bit of issues there. Aram, who's simply shown great chess throughout the tournament, very well prepared, and playing cleanly. Beating Jeffrey yesterday with the black piece is certainly a big milestone in his career. Speaking of Jeffrey himself, it's him that's playing with the black pieces. He is on the defensive side of a pawn endgame. I'm against Ray Robson, and there is nothing scarier to me than pawn endgames because they are all either won, lost, or drawn, and one move can destroy the evaluation. Remember, there is no such thing as slightly better in pawn endgames. You can actually calculate them all out mathematically.
And that's why they're so difficult.
And that's why they're so difficult, because one little mistake and that mathematics goes out the window. But since I don't have an hour to spend here and analyzing myself, I'm going to guess my instinct says this is a draw. Of course, white is the one that is pushing here for the win, and I'm going to explain why. He has more space and he has more opportunities for this king to quickly penetrate and try to create havoc on the pawns. But that being said, there's not a lot of avenues to attack the pawns. The king is going to try to stay between c6 and d6. This pawn is going to try to clamp down on a5, I believe. But I don't think this is quite enough to win. It is
not. Yes.
It is not. Yeah, I'm not surprised.
No, I'm just simply going to go b6, taking away that c5 square from your king, and you're not going to be able to push me around. Whenever you go a5, I'm just going to wait. I'm going to go king to c6.
Yeah, and you never take, right?
No, you would love to have the move b5.
Yeah.
b5, and I take on b5, and just imagine the king being on b4 and me being able to go a6. That would be a win for white.
For white, yeah.
But unfortunately, whenever you play b5, I'm taking back on b5 check. With a check.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
Yeah, it just seems like resources for white are not that great. Actually, pawn takes a5 is an important source of counterplay, because I am kind of forcing white to take on b6 at some point. I can't just lose time with my king. I don't have enough moves on the king side to just get rid of my tempi. Yeah, this one looks like it should be a draw.
It feels like Jeffrey calculated precisely.
Yeah, it feels like Jeffrey. Yeah, I mean, somehow they simplified from here. Yeah, okay. If you don't get into the pawn game, white's not going to have anything. The pawn game does look a little scary, but I'm sure that Jeffrey has this under control. We expect a draw as the first result of the day then between these two players. Ilia Nyzhnyk against Kamil Dragun. Really, sometimes when you look at these positions and you ask how to evaluate them, it's very simple. One side has space, the other one does not have space, therefore white is better. Everything else pretty much equal, but these pawns on the center are doing a magnificent job of keeping black's pieces at bay. The rooks are just totally passive, the queen is totally passive, the knight doesn't have any good squares, and white's pieces can just jump around the board whenever they want. I can take on b6 whenever I want, I can play rook a1 whenever I want, and penetrate
I also
on
E
like this
7.
idea of knight e3, knight f5.
I can play knight e3, knight f5 if I felt like it. I don't know where my knight is strongest. White has an infinite amount of tempi to improve his position. It's basically clay in his hands at this moment to maneuver around and figure out when he wants to make that final push or final breakthrough. And black is just absolutely passive for the rest of the game. No activity whatsoever. You could even put the queen on h3. It's not helping. It does not participate with the other pieces. I would say, Ilia, I would give this a decisive advantage for white. I'm sure that there is some way to maneuver your pieces properly and for black not to have an appropriate reaction back. And this center is just too strong, right? It even almost feels that white has more pawns than black. That's actually not the case. They're actually equal material. But the superiority on the center is just overwhelming.
Well, black only has one way to get out of this position, and that is to play f5.
Yeah.
And try to break in the center like that. That's why I want to play knight to e3. And first solidify that control over the f5 square, and then remaneuver my pieces on the a file. Take on b6, rook a1, rook a7, and so on.
Absolutely agree with you, Cristian. When you look at this position with the black pieces, you think, how do I get out of a bind? The most common way to get out of a bind in this kind of situation is you want to create a pawn break. You want to create that tension. You want to make sure that the pawns disappear and your pieces start getting some breathing room. So for that reason, the move knight e3 f5, preventing that only break that black has, jumps to mind very quickly. That being said, all of that's being true, the move f5 is actually very sad because even if you get that move in, pawn on e5 is isolated, and in some cases it will actually just hasten black's demise. So certainly a tough position here for the Polish player. And I think last but certainly not least, okay, maybe least, we have this game between Hans Niemann and Alexander, but nothing to do with the players, but more to do with the position. It is a little bit on the dry side. White has a pair of bishops, a little bit more space. It is an exchange Slav.
Maybe white has some clear chances, because if I have, okay, b4 is a very important move.
Yeah,
right?
I think so too.
If you play any other move, so let's just play something like king d8, right? Now after a4, I think you're quite in some trouble, because if you take on a4, obviously that's going to allow me to create a new weakness, the pawn on a6, activate my bishop on d3, and this is going to be quite a difficult defense for black. If you go b4, well, you still have that weakness on b4 after this move a5. Very important move, creating, basically activating both of my bishops at the same time.
Yeah, and I think Alex is a strong player that is very used to exchange Slavs. He actually plays it both with white and with black. He is one of those players that enjoys the symmetrical structures very much. I actually played it with the black side against him in the US Chess Championship, so I know how clever he can be in this kind of situations. But he spots this problem, puts the pawn on b4. This pawn is probably not going to stay on a6 for very long. We'll probably go all the way back down to a5. And I agree with you, Cristian. Obviously, I would take black. I would take white. You have the pair of bishops and more space, but I don't put Hans's chances of converting this one too high of a point.
Alejandro, we have breaking news in this position.
Oh my!
Elshan did find the move g5.
Good stuff.
He found it, and now he's in the driver's seat. As white, you've been attacking black's position for so many moves. Right now you're on the defensive end, and queen to f2 is a very difficult practical decision, difficult move to make. You're still losing even after that, at least objectively, but perhaps queen to f2 gives you the best chances in the position. Nevertheless, I don't see this as an easy move to make. I think white is going to try for a very long time. He only has 11 minutes on the clock right now to find something to break through and potentially win this game and get to the black king. Unfortunately, there's no such thing in the position, and this knight g7, knight to f5 is coming with devastating consequences after g5. Black is in the driver's seat, and it seems like maybe Elshan is going to bounce back with a victory today.
Yeah, very nice from Elshan there with the move g5. Topsy-turvy game for sure.
Oh, he loves playing that move g5. Look at him.
Look at him, yeah.
He's so proud of that move.
Look at that air of confidence, right? But it's a nice move to play, right? You play g5 and you know, oh yeah, that was a good move.
It's an amazing move to play, yeah.
Yeah, and the pressure that you put on your opponent, the king, the clock ticking, the knight coming to f5, you can see it. Look at that little stare Elshan just gave his opponent. I mean, that's such an Elshan thing to do. It looks bad for white. Let's see if he's able to survive.
One game that's going from bad to worse, Alejandro, is the clash, the one that we were having our eyes on as the main game in the B group, the one between the rating favorite Robert Hungaski and the leader in the event with 3 out of 3 points, Chris Repka. And this one is not going anywhere for white. In this position, he played the move queen to a3, queen to d1, b6, just simply making more space for the bishop on c8 to potentially join the fray via the queen side, via the square a6. And at this point, he decided to go f5, try to create something on the king side, try to get to the black king. Nevertheless, as I was mentioning, this f5 allows this bishop on e7 that was, let's say, a bit passive for the moment, activate via g5 with devastating consequences once again. Bishop to g5 came on the board. Queen takes g4, you equalize the pawns, but unfortunately, your position collapses because all of my pieces are going to invade, and that's going to be all she wrote. He played a queen to b2, king to h3, and now we have rook to c2 on the board, bishop to a6 to follow, bishop to f1, bishop to e2. This is not looking good. This is looking very, very bad right now. 4 minutes and 30 seconds and counting, 5 moves to make. But to be honest, after queen to f3, bishop to a6, instantaneously played, the computer just, well, it's so bad that the computer right now wants to take on d5 and just simply give the rook for absolutely nothing. Resignable at this point.
Yeah, it's not going to happen. What happens to rook d1, just by the way? I think it's the only human move.
Rook to d1, I'm just simply going to go rook to c3.
Yeah, this looks terrible.
And if you take queen to f2.
Yeah, you just can't defend the knight, right?
No, you're going to give a check. I'm going to go to h7, and that's the end of your attack.
You're not even going to take the queen, huh?
No.
Oh, queen a8, yeah.
No, queen. You have one check, and once again, I go here, and that's it. This one is, yeah, it's done. After bishop to a6, maybe he's going to go rook to d1. I'm sure Chris already knows this. He's been playing quite quickly the last few moves. He calculated all of this. It's not very difficult to calculate. You have so many attackers. White doesn't have enough defenders, and this position is about to collapse for Robert Hungaski, and that's going to allow Chris Repka to move on to 4 out of 4 in such a strong field. Alejandro, what's your opinion on that?
I have the feeling that I could have subbed him in for another SLU recruit, huh? I'm just kidding. I love my recruits. Chris Repka with a very convincing play, and you see already the moves rook d1, rook c3 on the board. We expect the move queen f2. I wanted to check this game of Elshan very, very quickly because we had very quick updates. g5, knight e4 was played by some, and instantly came the move knight g7, not even a thought over about this one. I find it interesting that this was played instantly, this move knight g7, but if it's good, it's good. It does throw a knight f5, knight f6 check, and instantly again the move king f8. Knight f5 is on tap. You don't care about knight takes d7. I guess I'll just take it back with the bishop. And it's not so much about the exchange anymore, but about the power of these pieces. And this king on g3 being totally stranded on the wrong side of the board. And yeah, this looks winning to me. I think the move knight f5 is just too difficult to deal with.
No, absolutely. And this knight to g7, king to f8, it's obvious that Elshan, from afar, calculated this whole variation. And he calculated with decisive precision, because after you take on d7, bishop takes d7, and you try to do something like bishop to d3, it looks like the only move that defends against knight to f5, right? You would love to play rook to f3 and sacrifice that rook. The problem is there's another rook on the board, which is unprotected. The rook on d4, I can just simply take that off the board. So after bishop to d3, now this is what I'm going to start looking at. Your queen is defending too many weak spots. One of them is g2. Another one is e3. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to attack that queen. I'm going to play rook to a2, which finishes the game.
Yeah, the problem is that if you take on a2, queen e3 check, as mentioned before, this rook on d4 is always hanging. And
you're not losing one rook, you're losing both
two rooks. Yeah, this is too much. Yeah, that's just game over, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, this looks like Elshan is cruising for a victory here against Arman Mikaelyan. Very nice attacking game. I think he's giving himself a little bit of a relax, already calculating the critical variations. And it's the black pieces that are coming together here in Group B. Chris Repka, the verge of victory, so is Alejandro Moradiabadi. And we were thinking Abhimanyu Mishra is also...
I think maybe we should watch that game closely, the one between Hungaski and Chris Repka, because I think we're going to see a handshake very soon.
After Bishop E2?
Bishop to E2 just finishes the game, forces resignation.
That is a big fork, and there it is, Bishop E2 on the board. And we expect, we can maybe see them on camera. Yep, and there we go.
There's the resignation, yeah.
And that's 4 out of 4 for Chris Repka. Playing like a beast, absolutely. Good stuff there from the youngster from University of Missouri. All right, let's continue. We're talking about the game between Abhimanyu Mishra and Khanin. I still like black a lot in this position. I mean, this knight on b4 is really good. This bishop on b1 seems a bit passive considering the structure on the king side. This bishop on c6 is nice. These pawns feel like big weaknesses, and of course black has a very nice control over the open file. Is this a decisive advantage? I would
Probably not.
Probably not. I wouldn't really say that.
But it's looking good.
It's looking really nice. I mean, you take a look at the.
Wait a minute.
Wait a minute. What?
My spidey senses are tingling, like Yasser would say.
They don't work, right? If I take on f3. So what we're worried about is that we see a queen on c7, we see some pressure on e1, and we're wondering if there's a back rank checkmate somewhere. But...
Okay, so let's go on with the variation after bishop takes f3.
And here you have to take on e5. There's no choice.
Queen takes e5, queen takes f3.
Yeah, and now the question is there something like queen b2?
Yeah, queen to b2, rook to d1, and maybe that's not enough, right?
Maybe there's no real way to put any pressure, right?
No, it doesn't seem like it.
Feels like I'm unnecessarily simplifying this position. Yeah, once the bishop comes to e4, it's not that good, yeah?
So the bishop dreams of landing on d5.
This one, yeah?
The light square white bishop, yes.
Okay.
Dreams of landing on d5. Unfortunately, it's a very difficult road to that square.
There's other moves we can play. I'm actually wondering if I should just trade everybody.
Sure, let's do that.
You take the rook, I think. You take here, I take here, and I go queen e5.
Right?
And the reason I'm doing it right now in this move order is that this queen is actually very badly placed. It actually has a very sad job. You don't really want to be defending pawns with your most powerful piece, right? The queen on b3 would like to be out there, free, playing around, giving checks. But it's tethered to this pawn on a4, this weakness on a4. It doesn't have the capacity to defend this knight on e1 so easily either. Can't exchange the queens. This is what I would normally like to play, but as we mentioned, this pawn falls and this endgame looks hopeless. So it actually asks a very pertinent question here on how you develop, right? You could go knight f3, but
you
here...
cannot, because now I can just simply take on f3.
I'll take with the pawn. The point, of course, is I can take queen e1, picks up a bishop. So a double attack, but I will take with the pawn, so the queen remains defending it. But this
so many weaknesses.
It's such an ugly. I mean, literally every single one of White's pawns is a weakness. Yeah. Every single one of them is indefensible by another pawn. They have to be protected by pieces.
But maybe that's not the best way to do it, right?
It might not be the best one to do it, but it is tempting enough for me to start considering these things.
I agree. Yeah.
And you play a two-result endgame, and I think he is going for it because he has started with the move rook takes e1. Rook takes e1 is currently on the board. I expect him to take again on e1. Yes, and he has. Rook takes e1, knight takes e1, and Abhimanyu playing very good chess today, playing for the win in this game. And here, perhaps there's a couple of different options, because queen e5 is one way, but queen d7, maybe just being greedy. Maybe greed is good. Just attack this weakness directly, and ask White how he's going to defend it, because I have actually no answer to that.
That's
I mean,
a very good question.
That's a good question, yeah.
Alejandro, yeah.
Sometimes easy questions are the hardest questions, and this one is an easy question to pose. But I don't see an easy answer to defend it.
Okay. I have an idea. So what if I just simply go bishop to c2?
Yeah, I understand. If I take...
I will take with the knight.
You'll take with the knight, and I don't even want to think about it. But I was actually wondering what you play after queen d2. And this one I didn't figure out.
That's another good question.
It's another. I keep asking good questions.
I have to go king to f1.
Yeah,
right?
you have to go king f1 to defend this guy. But here I even have this move.
Yeah, no. This is looking
And
terrible.
this is a distraction tactic. If you take with the king, queen takes c1. If you take with the knight, queen takes c2. And in either scenario, it just seems like a hopeless endgame.
That bishop on c2,
Maybe
that light square bishop is such a terrible piece.
It's a terrible piece. I think queen d7 is the correct move. But I wouldn't be surprised there's other very
honest,
strong
it looks
moves.
decisive. And this is what you should be looking at in this position. How
And-
to attack the weaknesses.
And it's not even the only way, right? We can even consider going like queen here, knight f3, and not going for any of those stuff, just go queen a1.
attacking the weakness as well.
Attacking the weakness
Very
this
important.
way.
Yeah.
Right, right.
And also bishop to e4 right now is a big threat, so you have to probably go king to h2.
But bishop a4 actually
Bishop
wins
takes
a
a4.
piece.
That's it, yeah.
It actually doesn't win a pawn, right? It wins a piece.
Oh, yeah.
That's the
this
problem.
is such a sad situation.
That's the problem, because bishop, let me put this on the board. King h2, bishop takes a4. And the queen doesn't actually have a good square to defend this bishop from, so you actually have to give up the
You
bishop.
could go to e3 and
what?
be happy that potentially you're going to give a perpetual, and then the surprise is that that bishop on a4 is just
It's just defending
the
e8, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think it's just game over. Queen e5, queen a1, I think is game over.
Looks like it.
Yeah. Abhimanyu going, has he won a game yet? I don't think so.
He just won a game yesterday
that's right,
against
that's right.
Raja Harshit. So
yeah.
he might be going for back-to-back victories.
Good for him. That's an excellent recovery. Of course, we are all very interested in what this great talent is going to be bringing to the chess world as he's contemplating his options over there. We have a couple of results. As we expected, Ray Robson and Jeffrey Chong have split that point. Chris Repka has won that game. Let's take a look at maybe some developments on the A group. Nothing major in the Dariush game. This looks like... This is the game between Hakobian and Antipov. And certainly you still prefer white in this position. I think the knight is a little bit more powerful than the bishop. But is this really enough? I don't think so. And actually, I'm wondering if I can play the move rook c7. I just spotted that.
I think you can.
I think I can, and after rook c7, I don't believe Antipov has any sort of problem.
No,
so this,
rook
I
c7
expect this.
seems...
Yeah, that seems like the easiest. And this just seems like it's going to finish in a draw. But a game that did not finish in a draw is a man that has 4 out of 4 and is setting the tournament on fire. It is Chris Repka here with his coach, Cristian Chirila.
Thank you, Alejandro. Yes, we are here with a very happy victor of the round. Chris, 4 out of 4, such a dominant display in the first part of this event. How does that feel?
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. I didn't expect this even today. I really don't know how to describe what I'm feeling right now. It's one of the best moments of my career.
Well, I'm going to quiz you. Do you know who else started this tournament with 5 out of 5 3 years ago?
No idea.
Your coach, I did.
Oh, really?
I started with 5 out of 5, so that's your quest for tomorrow. Chris, take us through the game.
All right. I even forgot right now what the opening was. Okay, French. See, so now I can't... my coach, Cristian, he's always telling me that I shouldn't play French. So I'm really, really happy that I won this one. This is a tricky line. This is new, and I feel like there's a lot of options for both sides. And I was really happy because I picked the option that I think my opponent wasn't prepared for, because after h5, the typical response is h6. But I knew that knight f5 is also one of the options. But everyone usually plays h6. So I chose to play knight f5. I was hoping I would get him out of prep, and I think I did, because he was thinking here for 10 minutes. He played the right move. Bishop f5 is a good move. But now I think white is supposed to play h6. And after g takes h6, cd4, if I'm not mistaken. And it's some kind of a bishop e6, knight c3 game. It's crazy, but white is slightly better. But I thought that it looks like black is better in the position, because I have the g file, I have the attack, and if he doesn't know the line, then for sure he's not gonna go for it, because I wouldn't go for it with white, and that's exactly what happened.
It's good logic.
So he took on f5. He did not play the move h6. He played knight to c3. And I feel like this bishop to g5 was a very crafty move. Were you surprised by his response f4?
I was, because I was looking at it, and knight e1, knight e2, usually those are the types of moves that lose you the game, but not in the French. In French, they often win white the games straight out of the opening. So I was a bit worried. I knew that I'm probably objectively fine after castling, but I was really worried about rook g3.
I think rook g3 was giving white the advantage. After bishop g5 or before?
Now.
In this line?
Now. So I was worried, and I knew that bishop g5 is probably not the best, but I really didn't want to be under such an attack. Even if this is objectively good for black, I don't like it because h6 is hanging, and that's why I played bishop g5. And I was very happy he didn't play rook g3 because I felt like that's a good move. My idea was to play bishop c1 and rook c1 and castle, and even though I'm strategically worse here than I was before, I felt like he will at least not mate me and it's a game. Queen d2 maybe, and maybe I have to play something like king h8. But I thought that this is okay.
Still a very long game.
I thought that I'm okay, but maybe I'm not. Maybe white is just better. I don't know.
All right, but f4 happened, and where did the big mistake from him come?
I think f4 was a big mistake because now he has no attack and his position doesn't make sense. His last couple of moves, knight e1, knight e2, don't make sense in this setup.
I agree with that.
And after that, it felt like a slow build-up for you to just optimize your pieces. And he was really looking for that breakthrough, which never came. Well, it came, but unfortunately at great cost.
I think he was supposed to play knight g3 instead of g4. And I think the position is very interesting. Maybe queen a6 is a small mistake. Now f5 is hanging, but even if he takes on f5, I usually have a counterplay with queen f1.
What was your move? What was your prepared move at this point after knight g3?
I actually wasn't so sure. So I always have the option to play g6, but that looks terrible. So I was thinking about bishop f8, but that might be losing. I don't know. Knight f5, queen f1. I was gonna calculate this. I didn't know what's going on. I mean, I'm certainly not losing. My pieces are active, and it doesn't seem like I'm getting mated. But
interesting sacrifice. And he decided to go g4. Were you surprised by this move?
Very surprised. I think I'm a bit fortunate in the last few rounds that it seems like my opponents are really trying to beat me, even when they could play without, like, this is a very risky move. My opponents are always choosing to play these risky variations. And I definitely felt like g4 shouldn't be possible. His pieces are on e1 and e2, and his bishop on c3 is not doing much, so I didn't really think that g4 could work.
And indeed it didn't. It felt that the build-up actually only helped black, especially after he gave up that bishop on c3, and then you just kind of cleanly cruise to victory. Of course, this seems already quite hopeless for your opponent.
Chris, congratulations. A dominant victory, a dominant display up to this point. Well, good luck in the rest of your games.
Thank you.
Well, certainly a great start there for Chris Repka with 4 out of 4. Congratulations to him. Let's take a look at what else is happening in today's round. Let's take a look at Elshad Moradiabadi's game. We were definitely interested in that one. Let's take a look at what's happened. We did leave it off here after check on f6, king f8. Bishop d3 prevents the move knight f5, but rook takes d5. Actually, this one is catching me a bit of surprise. We expected the move rook a2 in different variations. And I think rook a2 is kind of crushing here, right? I don't actually see the difference between this position and other positions.
Is this what he played?
He played rook d5.
Ah, he played rook takes d5. Yeah, no. Definitely rook a2, I think, was just killing.
Yeah, killing, right? This still looks pretty good, but, well, c5, huh?
Actually, can we go back for just a second?
Confused about things.
Can we just go back? So rook a2.
Yeah, rook a2 looks.
Let's see.
Just winning, no?
Because you do have that knight on f6, and maybe you will have some sort of a checkmate coming. So queen takes a2. You take one rook on e3, then you take my second rook on e3. But actually, you take on e5.
I always take on e5 first, right? So the king goes
Everything
somewhere.
falls. You can even take the knight.
Takes. I could take the knight if I actually taking the knight is just much cleaner, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
I mean,
just collapses.
I'm still hitting this. There's no checks. I mean, there's a check on a3, but who cares? And yeah, this is just collapse, right?
Well, he chose a different way, right? So he took on d5 with the rook. We have rook takes d5, bishop takes d5, queen d2, c5.
I just feel that if I have to play
slow, right?
c5, c5 is already a bit scary, right? Because queen b4 was checkmate, and I get it. c5 might be winning, but I'm not super happy about it. Check. I assume you have to go to g8
or e7. Why not e7?
Yeah, you can go to e7. Actually, e7 looks much better. This knight on h7 looks silly after knight king e7. Yeah.
And it feels like the same idea applies, right? King to e7, knight takes g5. Now, once again, rook a2 is going to come on the board.
Yeah, if you take on g5, then rook a2. Again, it's this ugly fork that you get with the queen on e3 later on in the game. Because this attacks the knight, and if you push forward, I'm assuming that, first of all, I could take the bishop. But I'm looking to see if queen f4 leads to checkmate. I actually don't see the checkmate, so probably I take the bishop. Is this true? There's no checkmate after queen f4?
Yeah, let's just, well, queen? Wait, go back?
Yeah?
Unfortunately, I don't have that. I was thinking about queen to e1.
Yeah, but then g3, right?
g3, yeah, g3, and now queen to b4. And if you play g4, then yes, queen to e1 is checkmate, but you can just simply play bishop c4.
Yeah.
So no, I'm just going to pick up your knight.
So just pick up the bishop, yeah. I mean, there's no reason to make your life hard.
Wait
yeah, you have queen a7 at
a7.
the end. So perhaps not the end of the variation.
Okay, maybe this is not that easy.
Maybe it's not that easy at all, huh?
All right, Alejandro, let's put our GM hats on.
Yeah, let's not be so lazy, right?
And try to find
what is
the
going
actual win. Instead of rook a2, maybe there's something better.
Rook a2 looks pretty good, though.
It does. But what if I try to force things with... maybe not.
Maybe rook... I mean, I could attack the queen also, yeah? Rook d1.
I was thinking about that. I did not like queen to f2 after.
Yeah.
Queen to f2, h4.
h4, yeah.
Game is over. Okay.
Yeah,
So
but
rook
if you
to
play
d1
rook
is the
d1,
move.
you have to play to e2, right?
But now I can take on d3.
Oh.
And knight to f5.
And then knight f5 is...
That must be a checkmate.
It has to be checkmate somehow, yeah?
That must be a checkmate. Okay, in the worst case, I can go queen to h2, which forces g3, and I pick up your queen.
That's pretty good. I'm gonna go with that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Picking up a free queen, pretty good. All right. He's instead played the move rook e2, perhaps because of these variations. Rook e2 was played.
So king e7 was on the board.
Yeah,
right?
king e7 on the board. Rook e2 has been played. Rook d1 looks like checkmate to me.
Well, I do have queen takes g5.
Oh, I apologize. I am blind today.
So maybe you have to start with something else. What if I go h4?
I have to go up. There's the only legal move.
So I follow up with queen d4 and then just simply pick up the pawn. Where is the checkmate?
The king must run. Yeah, I can go up to h5 even.
No, there's a knight on
That's a
g7.
knight on, yeah. Okay, king takes g5. And?
This is a good question. That is a great question.
Where's my mate? I feel I should be able to slow roll this somehow, but I don't see it. Like rook f1? It's not like white has any threats, right?
No,
So I could play rook f1.
you could. But then I actually go king h6.
Oh my god. What is going on?
I'm starting to threaten some checks on
You're
g5.
throwing my knight!
And your knight. Okay, I'm starting to like white's position.
Okay, let's not get carried away. What's going on? All right, where's the mate here? Rook e2 is a clever move because it allows this queen g5 stuff.
Let's find it. Let's find it. So queen to g5 is a big problem.
All right.
Man, I don't see it.
I don't see it either, right? It's not so obvious. I mean, it could be a move like king somewhere, but I don't really want to make a move like king somewhere.
So there was another option, but that didn't make any sense.
Why is it so hard? There's a king on g3. All my pieces are attacking. There should be a killing blow here.
Yeah, Where is it?
Where is it though?
Maybe a move like king to d7 or something like that.
Yeah, king d7 could be it. Huh. This is actually not easy, not as easy as I thought it would be. I still feel like there's a win here somewhere though. Well, we might be here all day. Yeah.
He's making his life more difficult than it should have been.
That's the thing that happens, right? Sometimes you make your life difficult just before time control, and then you panic.
So strange.
This is very strange. He had so many easy wins.
So he has 10 more minutes, right? No, never mind. He has 3 minutes
He has 3
and counting.
minutes. That's what worries me. That's what really worries me.
By the way, I peeked at the engine.
Yeah?
It's not winning anymore.
No way.
It's not winning anymore.
No way. This is not winning anymore?
No. And you know what the best move is? Queen to c1. Good luck. With a king on g... Well, wait. He played h4.
He played h4?
Even worse. Now it's only a smidden of an edge.
Really?
Queen to d4. I keep going up.
Oh my god. And then rook f1, we thought even queen,
this
king
is what
h6
we were looking
saw,
at.
yeah? You saw with king h6.
King h6,
Actually
it's
not a bad move,
playable. He did play queen to d4, so we're probably going to see this king
the only
landing
move.
on g5.
Crazy stuff there between Arman and Elshan. Absolutely insane. We're going to leave that one for a little bit because we do have a guest. Winner here in round number 4, Ilia Nyzhnyk, one of the strongest players of the area, has defeated Kamil Dragun. Ilya, how's it feel?
Pretty good. Finally, I won a winning position. It feels great.
It started off in round number 1 against Sam Sevian. You were on the back foot at the beginning, but after that you came back and it ended up in a draw. And after that you had another very pleasant edge against Lenderman, I think, right?
Well, no. In the first game, I believe I was in a little bit of a trouble after the opening, and I don't think Sam was ever in trouble. The game number 2 was what I'm still kind of hating myself for. It was just a completely winning position where I had an extra rook and then
against Hans.
Against Hans Niemann, and
That
well,
was
it
a
happens.
Houdini escape on his side.
Exactly. Yeah, but he mentioned the game where he escaped down a queen, but it was a very similar pawn structure. There was this game
Queen versus knight.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I believe he played in.
And he won.
He not only escaped, he won.
He won that. Yeah, exactly. So Hans is experienced playing down material, and as he claimed after the game, he's really good with knights. So.
Well, we're not in the past right now. You won a beautiful game today. How does that feel?
It was actually, yeah. It came down to be a very interesting game. My opponent surprised me with his opening choice to go for a sideline in English. Move number 2, bishop b4 is what my opponent played, and I was honestly not prepared.
Let's look at that game.
Trying to remember my analysis. Couldn't do it. Played what seemed to be logical moves, and somehow it worked out. So yeah, I believe the critical point of the game is if you go back a couple more moves before my opponent allowed me to play c5. I believe that probably Kamil did not, or probably he either did not see c5 or greatly underestimated the idea. And he can actually play bishop h3 whenever he wants, and that's the point. So if he just wants to play bishop h3, which I agree should be his main plan here because I have a bishop pair advantage, so trading bishops by playing bishop h3 does make sense. However, allowing c5 is not exactly the way to go in my mind. So if I were him, instead of playing bishop h3 immediately, I would have played b6, so just stopping c5. And the problem here with my position is that I have a very nice looking center, but those pawns never get to move anywhere. So I can't play d4 right now, and because the pawn on c4 is hanging. And if my opponent plays bishop h3, that would be, let's say I make a random good looking move such as. I'm not sure if that's a good looking move, but how about the queen e2? Now if my opponent plays bishop h3, takes. Yeah, takes, and here I can try to play d4, but now after I go d4, I immediately get an issue with the c4 pawn. So I believe that my opponent's play here will be based upon putting a lot of pressure against the c4 pawn by playing maybe knight a5, going back queen e6, and I wasn't sure what's going to happen. I believe that I would have probably had to do this if I wanted to win, but yeah, I was hesitant. Fortunately for me, Kamil missed on the c5 idea, and now my play is just extremely straightforward.
And we do see a result that we had expected. Abhimanyu Mishra has defeated his opponent. That makes it 2 in a row for the youngster.
2 in a row after, did he lose 2? The first
No,
2? He lost one of them.
He lost one against JJ.
And he drew this, the first one,
And
yes.
I think he drew the first game, yes.
That is true. So back to the game. Where did you feel was the decisive mistake after that? Or was it just a slow build-up?
I honestly, yeah, I felt like it just went downhill for Camille from this point on. He started spending time, and he suddenly realized how unpleasant this idea is. Yeah, because probably Queen D7 was or might have been a slight inaccuracy. Although I honestly do not really know what else, because the D5 was coming, and I don't think Black ever wants to take on C5 because I'm not even sure if I would have taken the pawn back. Because the idea of
D5.
Yeah, exactly. So instead of Queen D7, if you can go back one move, yeah. So if Black takes on C5 right now, I was planning to play D5, and I just have so much pressure, and these central pawns is what gives me so much space, combined with a very powerful bishop on F4. I believe I might actually have a decisive advantage at this point already. So I honestly don't know what Black should have done instead of Queen D7. It seems tough.
Those knights are just
exactly
really stepping on each other's
right. So yes, and here after I played D5, I'm not very happy with how I played this position out. Everything I did looked logical, but still I didn't have as much as I would like to have, as much advantage as I would like to have, if that makes any sense. Yeah, so here I have an amazing pawn structure, and my main strength here is that even if, yeah, so this move C6 that I made, or right here, yeah. I'm not sure, I was trying to make it work without playing C6, but it just wasn't working somehow. Black would always get to trade both of the C pawns, and I couldn't, even that position, I'm pretty sure without the C pawns would probably be slightly better for me, but yeah, there was really a judgment call here. I decided to go for this structure where obviously the space is my main strength, and my only issue with this position is that if Black somehow manages to get their net over to D6 here, it's not going to be as clear anymore. Because
so the only way to do that is via E7, C8, or H8, F7.
Exactly. This is exactly why I included the move knight F3 earlier, so that the knight has to go back to so that the knight has to go to G6 right here. Actually, the ancient does not really like the move knight G6, surprisingly, even though I said that was the only move here. I guess
maybe he just wants to give up the pawn.
No, I guess the alternative.
On C5?
Yeah, alternative was to take on C5, but I believe it would be. Black would get himself in trouble by having this double pawn structure, and yeah, I just felt wrong. So I was totally expecting everything that's happened, and here I suddenly realized that I missed my opponent's counterplay. So here my original plan was to play knight d2 right now.
Knight to f4 maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Knight f4 was what I vastly underestimated, and here there's this one knight c4.
All right, let's take a look at how the game more or less ended, because it seemed that he didn't get a lot of counterplay after that. It just seems his position is paralyzed.
Yeah, well, I think I could have won faster at one moment. So if you go a couple of moves forward, yeah, it takes knight e3, king h7. Yeah, I missed knight h8, knight f7 idea. So here, if I just want to avoid knight h8, knight f7, I should just play rook e1 first. And I believe the difference is that my rook gets to a7, and I'll have queen e7 in the end. So I'll apply a lot of pressure on the 7th rank.
You're not in time to get to d6.
Yeah, and Black is one move too short to get their knight to d6 because the c7 falls. So I think this was, I was very unhappy with myself that I missed such an easy plan. And after knight f5, actually Black is right on time. It's probably still losing because of, once again, I think this g4 move is very important because I want to make sure that after Black captures on f5, I recapture with the g pawn, thus creating another point of entrance for myself, which is a g file. So at this point, I think Camille was in a time pressure, and he tried doing something, but it's really difficult.
Yeah.
It's really difficult when you can barely move, especially with no time.
We do have another result. Christopher Yoo has won against JJ Ali-Marandi. The youngsters on a roll today here in Group B.
Nice. Actually, I didn't expect
Christopher to win. He looked like he might have been in a little bit of a trouble there, but that's discussion for another time, I guess.
He pulled us through.
First win, yeah. I'm extremely happy with myself, and what can I say?
Yeah, and this is just crushing.
Right.
Beautiful game, Ilia. Always a pleasure to see you breaking through, and good
you.
luck in the rest of your games.
Thank you so much, Johan.
Thank you,
Alejandro.
Thank you
Good
for
luck, guys.
joining us here, Ilia, for sure. Let's take a quick look at what's happened in the last few minutes. Abhimanyu Mishra will be joining us here to explain his game. Let us just really quickly jump to the Elshan game, because this is the one that has us glued to our seats. What on earth is going on in this position?
My goodness, that king coming to g5. Such a beautiful
G5.
sight.
Knight on f6. What is going on here? This is just absolute madness. It feels like the king on g5 should be checkmated, but the knight on g7 is just a little bit too badly placed.
So I'm a pawn up, right, as white. I'm
No,
counting it correctly,
You're
right?
not even a pawn up, dude.
I'm not even a pawn
You're not even a pawn up, man.
My goodness. Yeah.
This is
I have
crazy.
no idea what's happening in this position.
It's okay, we don't need to know, because we have somebody that plays chess now better than us. Grandmaster Abhimanyu Mishra, only 12 years old. He has won his game, and before we got into that game, let us figure out how he thinks of this position. Let's test him out.
Yeah,
Thank you,
that's-
Alejandro. Yes.
it seems like it's a very strange position with the king on g5. I mean, yeah, it's like very double-edged. I'm not sure exactly what's going on.
Yeah.
Well, your game was not double-edged, but much more of a strategical affair. Take us through that one.
Yeah, so like in the opening, he played this very interesting queen c2 idea. So the main point of this queen c2 is that you keep the flexibility of knight c3 or knight bd2. And then I had this plan of knight bd7 with b6, bishop b7. The idea of this is eventually some c5. And yeah, here knight bd2 is one of the moves, but I think knight c3 is a bit more testing. Because the reason is there are some lines like in a semi-slab where white goes for the same setup with the knight on c3, but he goes for like bishop. The bishop is already on e2, and later he develops it to d3.
Mm-hmm.
So here, if you put the knight on c3, it's a
more
better
active.
version, because yeah, the bishop can go to d3 in one move.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he played this knight bd2 setup. I took on c4, went c5, and this is like a
Also, maybe in some lines with the knight on c3, whenever you play c5,
Yeah,
maybe
c5
you
you
can
have
go
d5.
d5.
yeah. And this is a quite fine position for black, and it's fighting position exactly what I wanted. So he played queen b3, which queen b3 was a bit interesting, but I'm not exactly sure on what it was doing, because generally in hanging pawn structure, white is trying to attack on the king side. Like instead of queen b3, I think knight e5 is a bit more accurate, with the idea of like if knight takes e5, d takes e5, you can win h7. And otherwise, there's some f4 ideas, but I don't think it's still fine for black, but I think this is a better try for white. He played queen b3, which I don't think is really a good move. I just kept developing with queen c7. And now the next few moves, it was a bit difficult for both sides to come up with a plan. I brought my bishop to g7, which prevents d5 like once and for all.
Well, that looks like a very crafty plan.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, and he played this bishop a2 move, which is a bit, I'm not sure like on what he was doing, because d5, it still would not work with the bishop on a2. In fact, it kind of makes it worse, because every time I take on d5, a2 will also hang.
It just felt like in the last few moves you were going in the right direction, you were improving your position while he was creating more weaknesses for himself.
Yeah. Bishop c6, bishop c3, I played a5. The idea is because, I mean, with bishop c3, I guess white would maybe potentially want to play a5 against a move like, say, queen b7. And yeah, queen b7, a5, he gets to trade off this weak a4 pawn, and yeah, it's around equal. And instead of when I played bishop c6, the main idea is I want to play queen b7, and d5 did not work because of knight c5 first, because after knight c5, it was just winning for black, because you win this d5 pawn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so bishop c3, and now I played a5 to prevent this a5 push. And here he played rook b1, which I think he completely missed my next move, which was knight d5.
Right. We were mentioning this in commentary. This is such a nice strategical accomplishment for you to break out of the third rank.
Yeah, because c takes d5, bishop takes d5, I just win a pawn.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, he played bishop a1, knight b4. Instead of knight b4, knight f4 also looked quite promising, but I thought that since I played a5, b6 is a bit of weakness. Even though my knight on d7 is protecting it, I wanted to let my knight go free, and like some e5 ideas now are possible.
Right.
And therefore I put my knight on b4. And he played rook bc1, because after knight b4 I have another threat, which was say knight takes 8. So say you make some random move like say king h1. there's knight takes a2, queen takes a2, bishop takes f3. And now if knight takes f3, c4 is going to hang, and you do not want to play g takes f3.
Right.
So yeah, he played this after knight b4, he played rook c1. And now I decided that all of white's pieces are not looking great as such. But if you give white another move, I guess he'll play bishop b1 with the idea of playing bishop c3, because bishop c3 directly there's knight e3. And once bishop e1 happens, bishop comes to e4, and yeah, like black's position is still more preferable, but it's not such a big advantage.
Definitely, but you broke just
Yeah,
in
I
time with
broke
the
with
move
e5.
e5, and
Knight takes e5, and yeah, bishop takes e5.
yeah, and it seemed like after the complications, especially here after rook e1, white's position just fell apart. There's not enough activity.
Yeah, and this bishop 1v1, it's better than on a2, but even here, it's just staring to my pawn on g6, and there are a lot of variations where I was getting trapped.
Right, and queen d7 was one of the ways we were looking at for you to cash in. This must have been your choice, and smooth sailing.
Yeah, and I
from
felt like
there.
this queen e8 move was a very accurate move, just preventing any counterplay on b6. Like, I think queen e6 is also probably winning with the ending, but I just didn't want to give him any chance with my isolated pawns.
No, this seems absolutely accurate. And a nice smooth sailing here. You moved to winning 2 in a row. How's it feel to be playing here? How's your performance feel here so far?
Yeah, it feels great to win two games in a row. Like, after my start, and I played not a great game against Ali-Marandi. And yeah, that game was it was very difficult for me because, I mean, he sacked his 2 pawns in the opening with this preparation, and I could not react well and lost. And yeah, it feels amazing to win 2 in a row in this very strong tournament.
Absolutely.
Abhimanyu, always a pleasure to have you here in the studio.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure to see you doing well, and good luck in the rest of your games.
Thank you, Cristian.
Absolutely, a lot of pressure on this young man. Future of chess in America. No, not that big of a deal, right? Well, he has proven himself talented yet again, winning a brilliant game today. He is on his way to join some of these top players in the 2600 club.
Alejandro, we gotta get back to that king on g5.
Yeah, the
What's
king on
happening
g5
there?
is what really interests me. But luckily for us, they reach move 41, so they're slowing down.
Yes.
So now they can more or less keep a little bit of a sanity as they try to calculate their variations out here. Of course, a big psychological blow for Elshan, who must be realizing now, really sinking into him, that he's not winning anymore, because perhaps in the fury of the time pressure, as you see that king marching to g5, you must be thinking you're winning, you're winning, you're winning. And of course, we saw many variations in which he could have picked up an insane amount of material, but he lets it slip, reaches move 41, he's made his move 40, and now he has to sink into thought, try to find a way forward. But I just don't see it, Cristian. We haven't been able to find it. But we're going to let him stew a little bit longer, even as we have another winner of today's round, Christopher Yoo, defeating my student, Jamiljan Ali-Marandi. Christopher, how did that game feel?
Very good. I definitely did not expect to win that position.
It felt like he won the battle in the opening. After that, you guys transitioned into more or less balanced endgame, but you still had that extra pawn. Were you still thinking that you could potentially turn that into a victory?
Yeah, I didn't expect to get the extra pawn, so I was very excited once he just gifted me the extra pawn, kind of, very unnecessarily.
Let's actually pull that on the screen right there.
Around here, yeah?
Yes.
Yes.
He goes for
When did you feel like you're gaining the advantage? You're breaking through, let's say.
Not here.
So
I thought if like anybody was playing for the win, it would be him. But knight f6 was the first confusing decision for me. It didn't seem necessary to just give up this c7 pawn, but I wouldn't really consider it a mistake. And after knight e4, f3, I think he should have won knight f2 because he's threatening knight h3, knight f2 with a draw.
some sort of a perpetual right now, and if you try to go to g2, knight to g4 seems to be quite strong.
Yeah.
Yep.
What were you preparing to do after knight to
f2? Maybe just knight b5 and let him take a draw.
And just accept the draw. Yeah.
I don't see anything better.
Yeah.
Right, but he went knight c5, and it feels like he pushed the position. I really didn't like him pushing your king all the way to g3. I didn't understand that at all.
Yeah. I think he might have missed that after rook d3, I have rook a3, rook takes a3, knight takes a3, knight takes a4, knight c4. I think he might have thought that it was just a dead draw with king f2, rook d2.
Even this should be a draw, right? Not dead, but you should be able to draw this.
Yeah. I think this is like better than what he got in the game.
In the game, right? Because it felt like this endgame, we mentioned this on air, this move f5 was very important. It felt that this gave you the greatest amount of winning chances.
Yeah.
And where do you think the decisive mistake came? Because we also felt this one maybe still can be held. Where did the final mistake come?
Maybe he should have tried to put this pawn on f5 to stop my pawns from moving a little bit. Once I got my pawn on f5 and my knight on f4, this weak f6 and h5 pawn, he couldn't really manage the situation.
Right, he did a beautiful job there controlling his knight, not allowing him any counterplay, and once the king reaches here, you cannot defend all your pawns, you can defend any of your pawns, and you converted quite nicely. It just seems like you make a mistake against Christopher Yoo and you're just going to go down.
Yeah, at least today.
Well, 2 victories,
always.
Christopher, 2 draws, no defeats. How do you feel about your performance up to this point?
Very good. No complaints.
No complaints it is. Well, always to see you doing well here in the studio. Christopher, thank you very much, and good luck in the rest of your games.
Thank you.
All right, let's catch up on the rest of the games. We haven't been able to see Group A very much today, so I really need to jump to those. We've just been intrigued by Elshin's game, by a series of victories we've had, by the youngsters, by Christopher Yoo, by Abhimanyu, by Chris Repka. So let's take a quick gander at what's going on in the rest of the games. We have this game between Hans Niemann and Alex Lunderman. It feels that either Alex is okay or he's totally lost. It's somewhere in between. But I think he's holding quite comfortably after bishop d6, even maybe considering bishop b6 a more accurate move. And I have trouble believing that, although, I don't know. How do we feel about this endgame? I have no real... We take on c7, the pawn endgame is... Let's think about this one. I actually have no idea. Let me just make some random moves to illustrate points.
This should be lost, right, Alejandro? Maybe just...
yeah,
d6. Let's see.
d6, king c6, king c4, takes, king b5. But then
you have to do something active, right?
I have
f5.
like f5, right? Takes and h6.
Maybe it's lost, but not for not for my side.
Yeah, because you do make this counterplay very quickly, right? You take on a7, f7 never helps me, and it's kind of clear that this pawn is going to promote. At least that's what they taught me.
Let's backtrack a few moves.
Yeah, we're looking at this position after bishop e3.
Bishop e3, bishop to b6.
Yeah, that's my idea. You could play bishop d6. I'm not saying that you can't.
No, I like this move. I like this bishop to b6 try.
Right, because it forces white's hand, right? You don't have bishop takes b6 yourself. Love to trade the bishops off, actually. And I feel that if you take on c7 and...
Okay, what if I try to go...
By the way, I can't take with the bishop, right? I just don't know how I'm going to deal with king e2, d3, c4, b5.
Yeah.
But this is more or less the reason I wanted to play it like this. To get into some sort of pawn endgame. This is always going to be a draw if you move back. And if you take, there's really not very much I can see what can do.
Maybe try to do a3 at some point. So let's do the same thing, king e3, king d3. Sure.
I'm just going to shuffle, yeah?
Matter
Doesn't
how
really
I get there.
Uh-huh.
And now I go king to c2.
Mm-hmm.
a3. Let's see.
a3. All right. The thing is, I'm not really sure which one of these I'm losing, right? Or how I'm losing this.
Well, one thing is for sure, white still has the pressure in this
absolutely.
endgame.
Yeah.
Rook takes c7 is not the only way. Well, maybe rook takes c7 is the best move, but after that you're not forced to exchange the bishops. Potentially you can go bishop to d2 and continue with your plan. King to e2, king to d3, go with the king to c4, preserve the bishops on the board. And I do feel like white has decent chances to potentially convert this one.
I'm going to cheat because we're running out of time for the program. The engine actually thinks it's winning.
Completely winning.
Completely winning the pawn endgame.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I haven't really figured out why or how. It combines your idea. I wasn't really sure how a3, ba3 ever helped me, but it wants to play a4 at some point, some good point.
Okay.
And at some point, for some reason, it's winning, but it is beyond my understanding.
That's why pawn endgames are so difficult.
So they're so tough. We were
They're so
mentioning
difficult.
earlier in the program, they're so tough.
It's always about calculation, and it's usually calculation 20 moves deep.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
It's not. We're not talking about 5, 10 moves, right? We're
Yeah.
talking about some puzzles that you sit down and it's like, okay, move 35, it's actually a check.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
then it's winning. And I think Alex is more or less realizing that.
And you can see it on his face. He's
Yeah.
trying to calculate that
The whole
endgame
thing, and
right
it's
now.
not looking good for him. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's starting to realize that the pawn endgame is lost and that he has to find something else. And finding something else is not easy.
Okay, let's, before we end the program, Alejandro, I really want to see what the fate of that king on g5 is.
It still doesn't look alluring, I'll tell you that.
It's still on g5.
It's still on g5, but it actually, it just came back. We actually had this position, rook f1, knight f6 was played, and Elshon decided to, very, from a good practical perspective, take on f6, takes, and gave a couple checks. And now he's thinking, but it feels that black's never in danger. I can always perpetual check you. I have a feeling that this king is just too weak.
Yeah.
And play something like e5, throw in knight e6, and
That is a big
start
question.
pushing for a win. But an exciting round today. For me,
Wow.
the highlight though, 4 out of 4.
Yes, Chris Repka is definitely dominating the B group. He's just been playing stellar chess right now.
No, that's amazing, yeah.
And also, it's a pleasure to see Abhimanyu come back.
Yeah.
After a rough start, half a point out of 2 back-to-back victories is huge for his confidence.
No, it's huge. The way that he lost, he got out-prepared, but he said, I'm going to come back, I'm going to
Yeah.
come strong. And he's showing how talented he is. The little details of playing rook b1, leaving the bishop on a2, c3, undefended. He says, that's enough for me to win. I'm going to put the pieces where they belong, trade the ones that I need to. And immaculate technique there, converting that pawn.
Let's look at the results of today's round, Alejandro. We're going to start with the A group.
Yeah, the A group, we have Sam Sevian battling it out against Dariusz Fierz. Aram Hakobian is bound to draw against Misha Antipov in any moment. Hans Niemann is putting strong pressure against Alex Lenderman. Ilia Nyzhnyk soundly defeated Kamil Dragun after a couple of strategical mistakes by the Polish player. Ray Robson tried to put pressure on Jeffrey Shunk, but it was just not enough, and the young player from Dallas, Texas was able to defend.
And how about the B group?
In the B group, we have a lot of decisive results. Christopher Yoo has defeated JJ Ali-Marandi, Sam Khanin has lost to Abhimanyu Mishra, and Robert Hungaski has done the same against Chris Repka.
Well, a bloody round in the big group so far, and it seems like those last 2 results also pending and also looking quite rough. Well, quite an exciting day, Alejandro. Tomorrow we're going to be back with round number 5. We're going to be starting at 3:30 p.m. The show is starting at 3:30 p.m. But the actual games, which you can find on uschesschamps.com, are starting at 1 p.m.
Yeah, don't miss the action. Really fun stuff for you guys, and we will be here at 3:30. Don't miss it. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
This has been a presentation of the St. Louis Chess Club. Any reproduction or distribution of this content without the express written consent of the St. Louis Chess Club is prohibited.